My name is Evelyn Carter, and I am 67 years old. In the day we buried my husband, Thomas was the quietest day my heart has ever known. I stood beside the casket with my hands locked together to keep them from shaking, telling myself to breathe and last one more minute. My phone vibrated in my purse. I did not want to look. A message waited from an unknown number. I am alive. That is not me in the casket. Do not trust the boys. The ground tilted. I grabbed the chair to steady myself, and for a breath. I could not hear the pastor or even my own name when Doris whispered it. Michael and Daniel stood a few steps away. Their faces wore the proper grief, but something in their eyes did not belong to the day. Michael checked his watch. Daniel blinked too slowly, as if timing a thought. For a moment, I wanted to run to them and say that someone had made a cruel joke and I needed my sons. Another moment told me to hold the message like a lit match and show it to no one. I typed with stiff fingers. Who are you? The reply came at once. Cannot say. They are watching. Do not trust them. The word them settled on my chest like a stone. I put the phone away and tried to listen as the pastor spoke about rest and reunion. Rest felt like a locked room. Reunion felt like a door I could not find. We had built an honest life. Thomas repaired machines in a small shop off North Limestone, and I kept books for a feed store. We saved what we could, grew tomatoes behind the house, and taught our sons to use their hands and keep their word. Somewhere along the way, the boys learned to love the sound of money more than the sound of us. I told myself it was ambition. Ambition buys a coat and never asks whose winter it is. I looked around the graveside and counted how few people had been told to come. No men from the shop. Michael had handled the arrangements and said Thomas would have wanted it simple. Thomas liked simple but never small. Small makes room for secrets. When the service ended, my legs carried me to the car, but my mind stayed by the open ground. As Doris drove, I pressed my purse against my ribs and felt the phone through the fabric. A small, hard truth waiting to be named. If Thomas was alive, who had we buried? If he was gone, who wanted me to doubt my own eyes? Either way, the road home had become a question, and every turn felt like a test I was about to fail. Now, the house felt colder than the cemetery. I hung my black coat on the hook by the door, but the silence pressed heavier than fabric. Thomas' chair by the window stood empty, his toolbox still open from the last job he had tinkered with. I sat at the kitchen table and opened my purse. The phone glowed like a secret candle. The message remained. I am alive. Do not trust the boys. Michael had been the one to first speak of insurance. 6 months ago, he brought papers to the house, smiling too wide, saying, Dad, it is time to secure your future. He promised it was only for my comfort if something happened. Thomas signed after long nights of persuasion. I had felt unease, but I buried it beneath the hope that our sons only wanted to help. Daniel never challenged his brother. He followed, like shadow follows flame. If Michael said, sell the house, Daniel nodded. If Michael said, modernize the shop, Daniel repeated the words as if they were his own. Their visits grew short, their cars expensive, their voices full of deals and deadlines. Our simple porch, once the place for fishing stories and laughter, became a courtroom where I defended our way of life. Now, sitting alone, I remembered the last argument. Michael said, this house is worth almost nothing. You could sell and move to a better place. Daniel added, or let us handle the money. We know investments. Their wives sat beside them. Jasmine with her sharp perfume, Clara with her impatient sighs. Both women, speaking of retirement communities as if I were already gone. Thomas had gripped my hand under the table, the pressure of his palm telling me he felt the insult as deeply as I did. I walked to his desk that night after the funeral. The drawer smelled of cedar and oil. beneath receipts and old bank slips, I found a folder of insurance documents. Some bore dates only months old. Coverage that had ballooned without a word to me. And there, in his handwriting on a scrap of paper, Michael insists again. Says it is for Evelyn. I am not sure. My chest tightened. My sons were not mourning their father. They were watching me, measuring me, calculating how to move the last piece from the board. I looked out at the dark Lexington street. Every shadow looked like a secret. I whispered into the silence. Thomas, what did they do to you? The phone buzzed again. Another message. Look closer at the bank. The truth is in the numbers. My hand trembled as I pressed the screen. Whoever was guiding me knew more than I did. And I had no choice but to follow the trail, no matter where it led. The next morning, I forced myself out of bed before the sun rose. The coffee pot hissed in the silence, but I could not bring myself to drink. My hands shook too much. The message from the night before echoed in my mind. Look closer at the bank. The truth is in the numbers. By 9 o'clock, I stood inside the downtown Lexington branch, the same place Thomas and I had trusted for decades. The marble floor shined, but to me it felt slick, like a trap. Mrs. Howard, the manager, greeted me with pity in her eyes. Evelyn, I am so sorry for your loss. Thomas was a good man. Thank you. I whispered, though the words felt foreign. I need to see our accounts. All of them. She led me to a quiet office. The computer hummed as she pulled up our records. The screen filled with numbers, but my gaze froze on the red withdrawals. 1,000 in January. 3,000 in February. 4,000 in March. Money vanishing like water from a cracked jar. I shook my head. That is impossible. We never spent like that. Mrs. Quite muttered. Howard hesitated. He came in person. Mrs. Quite muttered. Carter signed every slip. Sometimes your son was with him. Michael. I believe. My heart stuttered. May I see the signatures? She handed me a folder. I traced the ink with my finger. It looked like Thomas' hand, but weaker. Shaky in a way I had never seen. He wrote with firmness even when his eyes grew tired. This was wrong. Did anyone else notice? I asked, voice thin. She bit her lip. Once. I remember him fumbling with his glasses. Michael said he would help because his father's sight was failing. But Thomas never let anyone read contracts for him. Never. I pressed the papers to my chest. Thank you, I said, though my stomach twisted with dread. When I returned home, I spread the slips across the kitchen table. The sums added to nearly $8,000. Money gone without a trace. My breath came fast. My sons had not only pressed their father to raise insurance, they had drained our savings too. The phone buzzed again. New message. The insurance was their idea. They used the money for debts. Debts. The word struck like a bell in an empty hall. I stared at the glowing screen until the letters blurred. That night, I sat by Thomas' chair. The papers spread around me like fallen leaves. The shadows on the wall stretched long, whispering secrets I could almost hear. If my sons had stolen from us, if they had poisoned trust with lies, then what had they done to Thomas? The truth was tightening like a noose. And I knew the next step. Tomorrow, I would seek the police. If there had been no accident, then the story of my husband's death was already breaking apart. And once a story breaks, it never hides the truth for long. The following day, I walked to the Lexington police station, my heart hammering against my ribs as if trying to break free. The brick building stood the same as it had for years, but stepping inside felt like crossing into another world. The receptionist directed me to Sergeant Keller, a man with tired eyes, but a steady voice. Mrs. Carter, he said gently. I was very sorry to hear about Thomas. What can I do for you? I gripped my purse so tightly, my knuckles went white. I need the official report on my husband's accident at his workshop. The one that sent him to Memorial Hospital. Keller frowned. Accident? Give me a moment. He tapped at the computer, brows knitting deeper with each click. Finally, he looked at me with confusion. Ma'am, there is no report of an accident at your husband's shop. My breath caught. That can't be. My son said. A machine exploded. The hospital called me. Said he was in critical condition from burns and head trauma. The sergeant shook his head. I checked our logs carefully. We have no record of any explosion. In fact, the hospital admission notes list something very different. He pulled a file from a drawer and slid it across the desk. My hands trembled as I opened it. The words blurred for a moment before they came into focus. Symptoms consistent with toxic alcohol ingestion. Methanol detected in blood. I pressed my hand to my mouth. Poisoning. Not a machine accident. Not a fire. Poison. Sergeant Keller's voice was low, almost reluctant. The doctors believe the methanol was ingested, likely through something he drank. The amount was lethal. The room tilted. My sons had lied from the start. They had buried me in stories while their father lay dying of poison. I forced myself to ask, why wasn't I told? According to the file, Keller said carefully, your sons signed the consent to keep the information confidential. They said you were too fragile to handle the details. I gripped the edge of the desk, the betrayal burning hotter than grief. They hadn't just hidden the truth. They had chosen the lie together. When I stepped out into the Lexington sunlight, the world looked harsher, brighter, as if it were exposing me too. My phone buzzed in my purse. Another message from the unknown number. Now you know. Trust no one but me. I looked around the parking lot. Every figure seemed like a shadow with secrets. My sons had told me a story of explosions. But the truth was poison. And someone wanted to make sure I kept digging. I sat in my kitchen that night. The police file spread before me. The word poisoning carved into my heart like a wound that would never heal. My phone vibrated again. The same unknown number lit up the screen. Tomorrow. Corner Cafe. 3 o'clock. Back table. Ask for James Holloway. Trust him. He has what you need. Sleep never came. By the time the sun rose over Lexington, my nerves were stretched thin. At 2:30, I walked down Main Street, my hands hidden deep in my coat pockets. Every sound of footsteps behind me made me flinch. Inside the cafe, the scent of roasted beans and sugar pastries felt almost obscene against the storm in my chest. At exactly 3, a tall man with gray at his temples and steady eyes approached my table. He carried a worn leather folder under his arm. Mrs. Carter? He asked softly. My name is James Holloway. I am a private investigator. He sat, lowering his voice. 3 weeks before he died, Thomas hired me. He said he no longer trusted your sons. He feared something was coming. He slid a small recorder across the table and pressed play. My husband's voice, tired but steady, filled the air. James, if you are hearing this, it means my suspicions are right. Michael keeps pressing me to raise the insurance. Daniel brings me papers. I don't understand. Yesterday, they asked what time I drink my coffee, whether Evelyn joins me. Their questions frighten me. If anything happens, it won't be an accident. I covered my mouth as tears blurred the cafe lights. Hearing Thomas again was both a gift and a torment. James pressed play on another file. This time it was Michael's voice, sharp and impatient. We cannot wait anymore. Dad is asking too many questions. The methanol is ready. In coffee, it will look like nothing. Then Daniel's reply, flat and cold. And Mom? Easy. Michael said, after Dad. She will be broken. We can make it look like grief drove her to suicide. The words stabbed me deeper than any knife. My own sons, planning not only their father's death, but mine. James unfolded bank statements and photographs from his folder. Michael owes $70,000 to a developer in Louisville. Daniel has $40,000 in gambling debt. They saw your husband's insurance as their lifeline. And once he was gone, they planned to control you. My hands shook as I touched the papers. All the doubts. All the strange looks at the funeral. The forged signatures. The pastries on my table. It was all real. I whispered, barely able to speak. They killed him. And they were coming for me next. James nodded grimly. You are not alone anymore. Mrs. Depper foremeant. Carter, we have evidence. But if we move too slowly, they will strike first. For the first time since Thomas' death, I felt a surge of something stronger than fear. It was resolve. The truth was now in my hands, and my sons had no idea that their own father had set the trap that would bring them down. The next morning, I awoke to a knock at the door. My breath froze. Through the window, I saw Michael's black SUV in the driveway and Daniel's sedan parked behind it. Both my sons together, faces rehearsed, carrying a white paper bag from the bakery on Main Street. Mom, Michael said with his practiced warmth, we brought your favorite. Apple turnovers, just like you love. Daniel added quickly. And we made coffee. Special blend. Thought it might comfort you. The bag crinkled in his hands, like the sound of a trap snapping shut. I remembered James' warning, don't eat or drink anything they give you. My smile was thin. My voice steady. Thank you, boys. But I already had breakfast. Michael's jaw twitched, just for a second, before he covered it with a sigh. Mom, you need to take care of yourself. We worry about you. They followed me into the kitchen, their eyes scanning the room as if measuring the walls for their plans. Daniel placed a stack of papers on the table. Contracts, medical recommendations, retirement facilities. He slid one forward with a pen. Mom, this is for your own good. A comfortable community. Nurses. Activities. No more worries. I touched the papers lightly, but did not sign. What happens to the house if I go? Michael leaned closer, his cologne heavy, his voice soft as poison. We would manage it for you. Sell it while it still has value. And with the insurance money, you could live without fear. Insurance money. Their eyes gleamed with calculation. Their concern was an empty mask. I folded the papers and handed them back. I need time. Daniel's smile tightened. Too much time could be dangerous. For you. A chill rippled through me. The threat lay beneath his polite tone. But I caught it. They wanted me gone as much as they wanted the money. When they left, their bag of untouched pastries still sat on the counter, the scent of cinnamon turning sour in my nostrils. I locked the door behind them and called James. My voice trembled, but not from fear anymore. They tried today. Coffee, pastries, papers. They are accelerating. James' voice was firm. Hold on, Evelyn. Sergeant Keller is ready. We will act before they do. I hung up and sat by Thomas' chair. My fists clenched. My sons thought I was fragile. They thought grief had blinded me. They thought I would bend to their greed. But they had underestimated their mother. I whispered into the empty room. Thomas, I will not fail you. They will pay for what they did. The fight was no longer about survival. It was about justice. And I was ready to see it through. The dawn air in Lexington was sharp when headlights cut across my window. I peeked through the curtains and saw 3 police cruisers roll silently down the street. My pulse thundered. It was time. At 7 o'clock, Sergeant Keller knocked at my door. His uniform looked heavier than usual, his face solemn. "Mrs. Carter, stay inside. We are moving now." I gripped the frame as I watched from my porch. Officers stormed Michael's SUV, parked in his driveway 3 blocks away. Later, I would hear how they found him in his study, frantically burning papers in the fireplace. At the same time, another unit reached Daniel's condo. He bolted for the back alley, a suitcase clutched in his hand. But he didn't make it more than a block before they brought him down. By 9, both of my sons sat in custody, charged with the unthinkable, the murder of their father and conspiracy to murder me. The trial came fast, yet each day felt carved into eternity. The courtroom brimmed with neighbors, journalists, and strangers who wanted to witness the spectacle. I sat in the front row, my hands tight around a folded handkerchief, while James Holloway carried the folder that had become my shield. When Michael and Daniel entered in chains and orange prison suits, whispers rippled through the room. My sons avoided my eyes. Part of me wanted to scream their names, to ask how love had withered into this. Another part of me had already buried them, alongside the lies they had built. The prosecutor began with precision. He played the recordings. Thomas' voice first, weary but resolute. "If something happens, it will not be an accident." Then Michael's cold words. "The methanol is ready. He will never suspect the coffee." The courtroom gasped. I closed my eyes when Daniel's voice filled the speakers. "After Dad, Mom will be easy. We can make it look like grief drove her to suicide." A woman in the gallery wept aloud. The judge called for order, but the truth needed no silence to wound. When it was my turn, I stepped to the stand. My knees trembled, but my voice did not. I told the jury about the boys I had raised with love, about the pressure to sell our home, about the insurance papers shoved under our noses, about the morning pastries I dared not touch. And I told them the most painful truth. I no longer recognized my own flesh and blood. Michael bowed his head. Daniel glared defiantly, though his eyes glistened. The defense muttered about debts, desperation, weakness. But debts do not excuse poison. Weakness does not excuse planning your mother's death. When the verdict came, the courtroom held its breath. Guilty on all counts. Sentenced to life in prison. 30 years before a chance at parole. My tears fell not for them, but for the children they had once been. The boys who had fished with Thomas at the Kentucky River, who had carried my groceries home after church. Those boys were gone. In their place stood murderers. As I walked out of the courthouse, James at my side, the autumn wind caught the hem of my coat. For the first time since the funeral, I lifted my head high. Justice had spoken. And though the price was unbearable, I had kept the promise I made to my husband's grave. The truth would not stay buried. 5 years have passed since the morning when justice finally reached my sons. I am 72 now, and the woman who once shook with fear at every phone buzz has become someone else entirely. Stronger, quieter, at peace. Thomas' old workshop no longer smells of grease and metal. I tore out the broken benches and planted roses and sunflowers. It is now the Carter Memorial Garden, a place where neighbors come to sit, where children run among the blossoms. Each Sunday, I cut fresh flowers and take them to the cemetery, laying them gently against the stone carved with Thomas' name. Beloved husband, betrayed father, honorable man. The foundation I created in his memory, the Carter Foundation for Victims of Family Betrayal, has grown beyond anything I imagined. We provide lawyers, counselors, and private investigators for families who face the same nightmare I once endured. Dozens of mothers and fathers now walk a safer road because Thomas had the foresight to hire James Holloway. As for my sons, Michael chose despair over redemption. He ended his own life behind prison walls. Daniel lives under constant care in a psychiatric ward. his mind broken by guilt and shadows. I mourn the boys they once were, but not the men they became. Blood may tie us, but love is measured by actions, and theirs were drenched in greed. James visits me often. Sometimes we drink coffee on the porch. Sometimes we walk through the garden, speaking of justice, of truth, of families both broken and healed. He has become my chosen kin. People in Lexington still whisper my story. Some call me a woman of iron. Others say I was cruel to send my sons away. But I know the truth, and the truth has set me free. If there is one lesson I have learned, it is this: family is not defined by blood alone. It is defined by loyalty, respect, and the refusal to harm the ones we claim to love. Lies may hide for a time, but truth has a way of surfacing. And when you have the courage to face it, even at the cost of your own heart, peace will follow. Each evening, as the sun slips behind the hills of Lexington, I sit on the porch with a cup of tea and feel the wind rustle through the trees. In that quiet music, I hear Thomas' voice, proud, gentle, reminding me that even in betrayal, love and justice can bloom again. When I look back on everything, I realize my story was never just about betrayal. It was about discovering what family truly means. I raised my sons with love, but love without respect can turn into a weapon. They chose greed over loyalty, and it cost them everything. I lost the boys I once knew. Yet I gained something deeper, the strength to stand for truth, even when it shattered my heart. Justice did not erase my pain, but it gave me peace. It taught me that blood does not guarantee devotion, and silence never protects what we love. The truth is painful, but it is also liberating. I live now with clarity, tending my garden, helping others, and honoring the man who believed in me until his last breath. What about you? What lesson do you take from my story, and from which city are you watching today?